Vogan vs Phaeton, Chrollo vs Zeno, Adult Gon vs Meruem. Frankly, making a list everyone agrees on is impossible. There's too many factors to take into account, and certain counter matchups that give every character different advantages over another. When I rank someone higher, I'm not saying they are winning 100% of the time, but that I value them as the overall superior combatant. This will become more clear as we go on. Also, do keep in mind this video was recorded as of chapter 400, so it's entirely possible we could get some new feats of characters in the future that wildly change the ranking I established, but if that happens, I'll probably make a video on it anyway. Picking the base of the list was probably the hardest part of this all. There are a lot of strong contenders, such as Finks with his Ripper Cyclotron to blow away Chimera Ant officers, or Zazan with her insane durability. Ultimately, I settled on Knuckle Bind for our 20th spot. Knuckle is a well-rounded fighter with strength on par with Kite according to Gon, able to help defeat a zombie kite puppet that was strong enough to help train other ant soldiers. He regularly stomped Gon following his second round of training with Bisky, outclassing the prodigy in power and speed despite never giving his all. Gon would be praised by many elite hunters for his skill and talent and would prove capable when he defeats numerous officer ants at the same time. A veteran of over 5,000 battles and a student of one of the smartest hunters alive, Knuckle boasts high levels of skill on top of his physical abilities. His ability, Hawk Aware, helps him against stronger foes by taking their aura away, giving him the edge. He believed he could take down the squadron leader Cheetu, who boasted the highest speed of all squadron leaders, a very skilled and balanced fighter. Nov, while lacking feats, is heavily implied to at least be on this level. For starters, Netero suggests he and Morel were around the same level when discussing the strength of Pito. As we'll discuss soon, Morel is capable of consistently defeating leader ants like Leol and Cheetu. The fact he even joins Morel and Netero into NGL to begin with shows how much Netero respects his ability, as this task force was only composed of the strong, which even Knuckle was not qualified for. When infiltrating Meruem's palace, Nov was not at all concerned with the prospect of fighting leader ants. He was only scared of the royals, so he can probably defeat ants of that level. Kite is a funny case since most of his most impressive displays occur off-screen. He gave Knuckle and Shoot a hard time despite being a zombie with less combat skills. When Pito was teaching the Chimera Ants how to use Nen, they pitied them for being average. Kite's aura, on the other hand, was enough to excite Pito as a valid test of strength, and after defeating Kite, Pito had come to the conclusion that they were strong. Pito was so impressed by Kite's ability that they developed Dr. Blythe just to revive him so they could fight again, and used him to train other ant soldiers. After losing his arm, Killua still believed Kite was far superior to him and Gon, even though Gon was even more pissed off than when he was against Razor. Phaeton is our first Phantom Troop member, and he's here for pretty obvious reasons. While out of shape, he managed to outclass Zazan in her base form without even using his Nen ability. Her transformation, however, proved to dominate him, blocking a sword strike with all of Phaeton's aura focused onto the tip of his sword. In response, Phaeton uses Pain Packer, turning his pain into a rising sun that cooked Zazan to a crisp. This Pain Packer was on the weaker side, as it is dependent on the damage Phaeton endured in battle. Of course, this means Phaeton has to take damage in order to use this power, and he has to survive on top of that, making it a risky power. That said, surviving long enough against transformed Zazan, then annihilating her, is enough to at least put him here. Morel Macernassi. As Knuckles' teacher, I think it's fair to say a good deal of Knuckles' skill was imparted to him by Morel. He's an ingenious tactical thinker combined with his Smoke Nen ability, which he calls the most versatile power in the Hunter Association. He defeats squadron leaders Leol and Cheetu, only these ants were amplified by Royal Guard training with their own unique Nen abilities. He later almost stalemates Shiapoof by trapping him in Smoky Jail, which is so durable neither Poof or Yuppie could break it. He's able to make shape-shifting smoke clones, a chain that Cheetu can't break, spew deadly poison into the air. His strength is impressive as well, tanking an onslaught from Cheetu and blocking Leol's Trident Strike. Making this more impressive is that Morel performs most of these feats while he's nerfed and not able to use his full strength. Of course, Morel has a powerful willpower as a Nen Master, always confident that he will win no matter the odds. Between Morel, Phaeton, and Kite, I think the three of them are all around the same level, and you could reasonably make a strong case for any of them beating one another. Phaeton's potential to unleash ridiculous amounts of raw power with Pain Packer, depending on the situation. Kite blatantly impressing P2 way more than any squadron leader, and while Morel might not boast the same physical feats that these two have, he technically fought more evolved ants and found ways to beat them without being overwhelmed. My opinion on these three changes all the time, to be honest, but at the time of recording, I rate it as Kite at the bottom, then Phaeton, then Morel, but it's okay if you think otherwise. They're all kind of in that above squadron leader tier. Killua in his base form is certainly an underrated fighter, capable of ripping officer class ants apart with his bare hands, trained since birth in martial skills and assassin techniques, and capable of flinging around lightning bolts that can stun royal guards. However, the real reason he's here is his ability, Godspeed. Using Godspeed, Killua repeatedly stunned Youpi and made him cry out in pain, and could rip chunks out of Shiapu's body at 1/7 strength. Doing this much damage to a royal guard, combined with his universally accepted top tier speed, he's a contender for strongest after the royal guard outright. The only reason he isn't higher is the inconsistent time limits of Godspeed based on the electric charge Killua has. Against Youpi, it lasted no more than a few seconds. Against Poof, he could go all night. My personal theory is that since Godspeed is divided into two different abilities, Whirlwind uses more charge than Speed of Lightning, since Whirlwind puts Killua's body on total autopilot and Speed of Lightning just amplifies his speed, with him only using Whirlwind very briefly on Poof. Even lowballing the time limit to when he fought Youpi, I think Killua would be able to inflict some serious damage to those listed below, who don't have particularly impressive durability feats. Even if he can't outright defeat them, the injuries they'd sustain would weaken them quite a bit, and I'm confident Killua in base could finish it from there. He's able to solo entire platoons of Chimera ants with just his bare hands and has been compared to squadron leaders, so he shouldn't be super far behind them even in his base form. On the other hand, Uvogin is such a physical beast, no one can really take him down. He's confident that nobody ever could survive his full power Big Bang impact, and this is showed when Kurapika's arm gets shattered on contact. Seeing as he's a founding member, it's not a stretch to say Uvogin has seen every troop member in combat and still thinks he could one-shot them. According to Chrollo, someone would need a manipulator or conjurer ability to stop Uvogin from using his overwhelming power, or he'd just destroy them. This means nobody Chrollo has ever met has enough raw power to match Uvogin, including Nobunaga, Finks, Phaeton, Hisoka, or even himself. Hisoka and Chrollo in the data books possess physical abilities surpassing leader-class Chimera ants, and Chrollo has also fought Silva Zoldyck before, who has enough strength to crush Chitu's head with a simple punch. These leader ants that give Morel and Phaeton a hard time don't stand a chance against Uvogin just using brute strength. Many confuse Uvogin for some amateur fighter or brute, but this couldn't be the case. He's able to throw a rock and precisely hit snipers so far away they look like ants. He defeated 3 Shadow Beasts using nothing but his head, unable to make the most use of his overwhelming power. Against Kurapika, he quickly analyzed his opponent's abilities, using the terrain combined with Een to catch Kurapika off guard. Certainly more calculated than Phaeton, who kinda just spurred out and launched a giant fireball at his opponent when he was getting beat. Against Killua, while certainly not as tanky as Youpi, I just can't see Killua take Uvogin down in the short time limit Godspeed has. Could he do some damage? For sure, but the fact Uvogin is on a completely higher tier than people like Chrollo in strength and durability makes me question Killua's effectiveness in the long run. If Killua's time limit was longer, say about 10 minutes as Tsubone suggested, then Killua would floor Uvogin and honestly everyone up to the Royal Guard, but that's more up for debate. As I explained in my Phantom Troop ranking video, I rate Illumi Zoldyck above Uvogin. Put simply, Hisoka, who values powerful opponents, highly seeks a confrontation with Illumi and sees him as a valid opponent, whereas he seems uninterested in the troop for the most part. He basically traded Uvogin's life to get Kurapika on his side, so clearly he wasn't a particularly high value target. Hisoka has an eye for talent and is somewhat of a power scaler himself. He and Netero were able to recognize Gon's limitless potential, as well as the fact he recognized Chrollo as the most powerful member of the troop, which is confirmed in the guidebooks. During the chairman election arc, Hisoka is sizing up the Zodiacs, a group of top hunters recognized by Netero as sparring partners that surpass Morel and Nav. Yet Hisoka thinks Illumi is even stronger. Illumi himself also thinks he could take Hisoka in a straight up fight, so there is some credibility to Hisoka's interest, since Illumi is most likely trained just like Killua and will only fight if he is sure he will win. You know, considering he taught Killua that. Killua also held Illumi and Hisoka in the same breath and tried to use them to scare Morel, Nav, and Netero, but didn't mention Kite, who should be a well-known and accomplished hunter that they'd already know about. Therefore, it's pretty consistent that Illumi should be safely above Morel level. His net needles also give him manipulation abilities that would help him defeat Uvogin or Phaeton, combined with the fact he likely received the same training that Killua has since birth and would be a top tier in terms of skill. Illumi's father Silva would come next. Silva, as I already mentioned, is strong enough to cave Chitu's head in with one punch and would be able to press Chrollo in combat. Chrollo, as I already said, has combat stats in the databook above the squadron leaders, supporting the aforementioned feat, and is also stated to be the strongest in the Phantom Troop. He is likely far more skilled and experienced than his son, and the fact Killua hyped up his precision without mentioning Illumi seems like Killua holds him superior in that regard. I think they would be in the same tier, but I rank Silva slightly higher just due to the fact we already know how he compares to top tiers like Chrollo, while Illumi is more ambiguous. That said, my pick for the strongest Zoldyck is Zeno, at least by a little bit. He and Silva did about the same against Chrollo, although Zeno did most of the heavy lifting. He almost effortlessly breaks down all of Chrollo's strategies in their first encounter, with Chrollo jerking off his abilities. He admits that Zeno's Gyo-enhanced strike would rip through his defenses, yet says nothing of Silva even though they've already fought. Chrollo then asks Zeno who would win in a fight if they fought one-on-one, implying he respects the senior Zoldyck even more than Silva. Even the legendary chairman Netero hired Zeno for a great sum of money to help him assault Meruem's palace, with the prospect of potentially fighting royal guards, and his abilities were enough to make Pito extremely excited for a good fight. And this part is a little of my own headcanon, but as the oldest main Zoldyck, he's probably the most experienced, and his skills in martial arts and assassination techniques likely became the foundation for the modern-day Zoldicks. He's still leading his son on missions, despite the latter technically being the head of the family, so it's clear his wisdom and skill in combat is recognized even now. Before we hop into the top 10, I did want to discuss a few honorable mentions who didn't make the list. Frankly, it's not that these characters were too weak, but rather pinning down their exact scaling is hard due to a lack of feats. The Zodiacs are the top hunters and they think that they are stronger than Morel, but we don't know enough about the individual members to actually rank them. For example, who is stronger between these two guys? We really don't know, so they don't really work that well on a ranking video. Bisky is well known for boasting some top tier databook stats, but ranking her on those stats alone just didn't sit right with me. Her only feat in the series was destroying Genthru's bum-ass goon and clowning on base Killua. Not bad, but not great. Nanika's wish-granting power does have the potential to defeat anyone on the list, but that only works if someone makes a wish for her. We also know that Aluka is weaker than normal people, so this power isn't that good in a fight. Kurapika has good feats against Uvogin, but trying to figure out how he stacks up when not fighting a troop member is difficult. I'm making an entire video on Kurapika explaining him in depth, but it's a little complicated for a ranking video. The Dark Continent Calamities and the 14 Princes of Kakin may boast impressive feats in the future, but as of now we know very little of them. Maha or Zig Zoldyck is interesting since Maha fought Netero in his youth once, and Zeno says Netero was the only person to survive a fight with him. Zig was also an ally of Netero as they visited the Dark Continent together. It's also possible Maha and Zig are the same person, we don't really know. Sometimes some people theorize it's like a inconsistency or mistake from Togashi. We really don't know. Razor actually has a very good case to be on the list due to blatantly overpowering Hisoka numerous times in the dodgeball game, but some problems arise. Firstly, Gon and Killua could react to and dodge Razor's throws throughout the game. Gon and Killua at this point were no match for low-ranking Chimera Ants, let alone Knuckle. Gon even manages to survive a direct hit from Razor when using Ko, as does Tezgura, who admits he can't even beat Genthru. It's possible Hisoka held back in the dodgeball game as he tends to do, but if you think he really went all out and Razor safely overpowered him, I'd put him right above Uvogin, but I'm just not too sure. Moving on to a controversial placement, the Magician of Death Hisoka starts the top 10. Being the first real villain of the series, he boasts a long feat catalog, but for our purposes, He fought Chrollo later in the manga, blatantly outclassing the leader of the Phantom Troop in sheer physical prowess. He blocks a barrage of kicks with no damage, tanks numerous off-guard blows, and draws blood from Chrollo with 1 or 2 counterattacks. Not even Zeno or Silva could blatantly outclass Chrollo in this regard, who for the most part just blocked or tanked everything they hit him with. People tend to downplay Hisoka due to his loss against Chrollo, blatantly ignoring the insane lengths Chrollo went to prepare for the fight. Had they not fought in Heaven's Arena, or Chrollo didn't get Shalnark's Black Voice, this strategy would have fallen apart. In this fight, Chrollo was also trying much harder than he did with Zeno or Silva Zoldyck. By his own admission, Chrollo had never used more abilities on anyone but Hisoka. He's also specifically making use of a bookmark ability which, according to him, vastly improved his combat ability. He's also blatantly trying to kill Hisoka when he was not serious against Zeno and was trying to capture him and steal his Nen ability. The fact Chrollo prepared this much goes to show how much of a threat he saw Hisoka. It does not make Hisoka look weak. Hisoka boasts a top-tier analytical mind combined with a highly versatile ability. He almost always holds back his strength to match his opponent and defeats them with sheer skill. Castro, Goto, Razor. All these opponents had more raw power than Hisoka, yet were outmatched due to his cunning. This is why I don't understand why people think Hisoka would lose to someone like Uvogin. Hisoka could set traps with bungee gum, restrict his movements, launch projectiles. Even against Chrollo, Hisoka was able to keep up intellectually, and was just caught off guard by prep. Upon his revival with Postmortem Nen, he's even able to use bungee gum to regenerate missing body parts, giving him a huge edge in a series where, at best, someone might heal a broken arm in a few weeks. And while I think they're relative, when push comes to shove, I rate Chrollo Lucilfer as slightly more powerful. While Hisoka is blatantly physically stronger, and both are master strategists, Chrollo compensates with his versatility and abilities. Teleportation, explosives, sealing abilities to trap his opponents, mind control. In a world where the average person has maybe 2 abilities, this guy is stacked. Even his standard poison knife would be effective against anyone without poison resistance training like the Zoldicks. After using prep to beat Hisoka, both end up on the Black Whale towards the new continent. Rather than cower in fear of the Grim Reaper, Chrollo is out for blood, planning to jump Hisoka the moment he sees him. No plan, no prep. He simply thinks he could win a straight up fight, although I still believe it would be high difficulty. Many argue that Zeno Zoldyck would be superior to Chrollo based on their fight, and the fact Zeno implies he'd win in the end. For one, Zeno says he'd only win against a non-serious Chrollo, as Chrollo spent the entire fight trying to capture Zeno instead of defeating him. Zeno then says it would be different if Chrollo was going all out, refusing to say which or the other would really win, possibly because he isn't sure. Maybe he's too prideful to admit Chrollo would win, we just don't know. Based on the feats in the fight, I'd argue Chrollo is quite a bit stronger. In their initial hand-to-hand brawl, Chrollo blocks or tanks every attack Zeno or Silva hits him with, and the one time he launches a counterattack, he manages to cut Silva with a poisoned blade. Chrollo then flexes his aura, and without even using his ability, Zeno suspects he may have to sacrifice his life to take down Chrollo, even though he had help, and Chrollo was able to defend himself from Zeno while keeping tabs on Silva the entire time. The Hunter Encyclopedia, a guide written, or at least supervised by Togashi, states that when Chrollo is serious, he's equal to Silva and Zeno. You could interpret this as saying Chrollo, Zeno, and Silva are all evenly matched, or that full power Chrollo is equal to Zeno and Silva at the same time, putting Chrollo equal to Zeno at worst to outright superior. Between Chrollo, Hisoka, and Zeno, I think a strong argument could be made for any of them taking this spot. This is just how I see their ranking. Let me know who you think is the strongest in the comments below. Now, this next placement is a bit of my own headcanon, but we have Jing Freaks as number 8 and Beyond Netero as number 7. Jing is a strong contender for the greatest Nen prodigy of all time with his ability to instantly learn Nen abilities that hit him. He copied Leorio's remote punch and created a whole new ability as well based on it. Netero considered Jing within the top 5 all-time Nen users, yet didn't seem at all impressed by Hisoka or Illumi when they took the Hunter exam. He also captured the future Game Master of Greed Island, who arguably pressed a full-power Hisoka. Beyond strives for the Dark Continent, a place his father was not prepared to deal with. In response, Isaac forbade Beyond from traveling to the Dark Continent until his death, which Beyond obeyed. Misai Stom, however, theorizes Isaac's true purpose was to get Beyond to come for his life, baiting his son into a death match. If Netero wanted to fight his son this badly, his combat ability must be rather high considering Netero was becoming rusty due to the lack of worthy opponents in the modern era. That said, Beyond still obeyed Netero's orders, or maybe he did try to disobey him and just got slapped. So, I think scaling him above Isaac as of now is a bit dubious. We still don't know either Jing or Beyond's abilities just yet, nor have we even seen them fight. But I do feel it is fair to rank them this high based on what little we've seen, and if you don't think so, then this is just kind of my headcanon. Yet, the Royal Guard is in a tier above the rest. According to the Hunter Guide, these three were all around the same level, at least in their base forms, so most of the following would apply to all of them. Upon birth, Pitou floored Kite with no Nen ability and was stated to be the most formidable opponent Gon and Killua had ever faced. Hisoka, Illumi, Razor, Genthru, and most of the Phantom Troop are all inferior to newborn Pitou. Killua warns the chairman that not even he could defeat Pitou, which he actually agrees with, and in shape Netero then tests himself, to which Colt answers even the Royal Guard would defeat him. Obviously, Colt would have no way of knowing about the Guanyin Bodhisattva, and Netero was downplaying himself against Pitou, but being above base Netero is more impressive than you might think. Base Netero was seen as a bigger threat than Zeno Zoldyck as they fell from the sky. The Nen proficiency chart also says his abilities as an enhancer surpass Uvogin, meaning he may hit harder than the physically strongest troop member without even using the Guanyin Bodhisattva. Each guard also survives tail smacks from Meruem, which blew the heads off squadron leaders, and their stats in the databook are an entire level above Hisoka, Chrollo, and so on. Pitou can also take a direct hit from Netero's Guanyin without a scratch to show, confirming that at least in regards to raw power they are superior to the chairman. As for how they stack up, Poof is the weakest guard in my opinion. His best traits are definitely his overpowered abilities, Spiritual Message, and Beelzebub. With these abilities, Poof has access to intense sensing, hypnosis, cloning, microscopic size. He's a pretty slippery fighter in that regard. That said, his physical abilities are less than desirable compared to the other guards, even though he's still a top tier in that regard. Godspeed Killua was capable of ripping chunks out of Poof at 1/7 his original power. Compare that to Youpi, who is over 10 times stronger than Killua when using Godspeed. If Killua is equal to around 1/7 Poof, but is 10 times weaker than Youpi, mathematically it would follow Youpi is a good chunk stronger than Poof. This is also prior to Youpi's evolution, meaning logically he'd only get stronger. His body is a weapon, with the ability to shapeshift into whatever form he considers necessary. From whips, enlarged muscles, dozens of eyeballs to perceive oncoming threats. I do think it's possible Poof could cop a dub using his hacks abilities, as Youpi is more susceptible than others to complex abilities. Even then though, when fighting a team of Shoot, Knuckle, Morel, and Killua, with assistance from Melioron, none of their unique abilities mattered in the end. And Pitou is my pick for the strongest Royal Guard. Pitou is called the strongest Royal Guard outright numerous times. A lot of people will debate the statement from Illumi which calls Pitou the top soldier of the king, arguing he shouldn't have any idea how strong the royals were, but that's missing the point. Illumi is a hunter. He has access to information from the association, and this was after a major crisis, the death of the chairman. The fact Illumi even knows what happens means he had to have heard about it from somewhere. That, or he's just a good guesser. Morel, Knuckle, Colt, Palm, Ikalgo, Killua, all of these people have met or fought the Royal Guards in some capacity, and would logically report the events back to the association. This is the only possible way Illumi could have even known about Gon and Killua to begin with. So I think it's likely that Pitou was considered the top soldier by the people that were actually there. And let's just be honest, did Togashi write this dialogue to mess with us? Was he thinking he tricked the reader and that Youpi is secretly the strongest? I don't think that's what he was thinking. The guidebooks also back this up, stating Pitou held power second only to Meruem, which includes Poof and evolved Youpi. Chairman Netero is number 3. stated to be the strongest hunter alive, even in his old age, and the all-time strongest nen user in his prime. He surpassed his limits through decades of training before any character on this list was even born. Many people rate Pito and the other royals higher due to the many statements that Netero was weaker than they were, but there is always context. Netero is rusty during the first half of the arc, and doesn't regain his full power until later. He's also being modest, rating himself equal to Morel and Nov, a level even lower than the Zodiacs who thought Netero was too powerful to even empathize with the common hunter. Regarding Colt's statement after Netero gets serious that he'd lose to the Royals, I would agree that this means they have more aura or more raw power than Netero, but as we all know, Netero is more than just raw strength. When Pito confronted Netero, they suspected they could beat him in his base form, but could not anticipate or counter Netero's overwhelming speed and his unavoidable attack even with their full power. Meruem in essence is a far stronger, faster, tougher, and smarter version of Pito, yet struggled greatly with getting past Netero's defense just 2 times, praising Netero's ability the entire time. I'd love to keep discussing Netero, but I do have an entire video on the chairman, so please check that out to understand Netero's strength and his story. Gon in his adult form is the total opposite of Netero, a beast with overwhelming power. Immediately after transforming, Pito feared for Meruem's life much more than when Netero first appeared. Gon then dominates the strongest royal guard, incapacitating her with just 2 attacks. In the end, Peatful is grateful that she will die because it means the king is safe, which means she did think Gon could have run hands with Meruem. Even when Pito was amped by post-mortem Nen, Gon only lost his arm because he let her take it and he instantly destroyed Pito again. An argument could be made that without Meruem's intelligence, Gon would never get past Netero's defenses. Meruem on the other hand believes that no matter what, Netero could have never defeated him. The Hunter Guide says that upon birth, Meruem was already the strongest being in history above Prime Netero, yet adult Gon would be a threat to a stronger Meruem. Due to that, I personally say Gon is too much for the legendary chairman, but a good argument could be made. Number 1. Meruem in his resurrected form after surviving the Rose Bomb. Gon was a threat to base Meruem, possibly slightly stronger with his Jonken, which amps his strength by 10 times. However, Meruem had surpassed his base form numerous times over. Meruem's new power surpassed Poof's wildest imaginations, and Knuckle believed it would take an entire nation's military to take him down when a single small nuke had crippled him before. He also has a godlike arsenal of abilities: Rage Blast, Information Absorption, Flight, Shapeshifting, Intent Sensing, a speed of light N. He's like a character from a whole other series. His intelligence even surpasses Netero and every character in the series, and his databook stats are literally off the charts. Even if Gon was equal to Meruem in terms of power, Meruem's arsenal combined with his god tier intelligence is just out of Gon's pay grade.
ありの腕がなけりゃ祈れねえとでも。祈りとは心の所作。心が正しく形をなせば思いとなり、思いこそが実を結ぶのだ。